Hello and welcome to this webinar for employers showing you how to sign up for a Now Pensions Master Trust pension scheme. My name is Martin Olive, I'm Strategic Partnership Manager and I'll be your host today. What I'm going to cover is the fact that the online application method is the only way that you can sign up with Now Pensions now. The reason that we've done it is that it's simple, fast and above all accurate, so that all the information that you give us will be reflected in the participation agreement and everything will be set up correctly. The session breaks down as follows. I'll show you through the log on process if you haven't already done so on our website, how you'll create the contributions that you want for all your employees or different groups of employees, what information we need about you and about your payroll details, how you submit the form and set up the direct debit mandate which you'll need for us to be able to collect your pension contributions. And I'll then talk briefly about the next steps, what happens after the application is submitted to us until you're ready to go with your new pension scheme and your employer portal. So I will now go into the live demonstration. If you haven't already been on a website, this is the first page that you will see on that website. So you would then, once you're registered, be able to go to login and log in. I've got a preset one for purposes of this demonstration. Click the login button and we're all ready to go to start your application. First screen is estimating for you that it'll probably take 15 to 20 minutes for you to complete, so long as you've got all the information that you need. And there's a list down here showing you what it is that you will need in order to create your application. I won't go through those now because we'll go through it with the process in just a second. Hit continue. And that will take you through to the first of the questions on the application form. So whether or not you use the services of a payroll bureau, or linked to an accountant or not linked to an accountant, you may do or you may not. If you do, you click the yes button, start to type in the name of your payroll bureau, and it could be that we've already used that payroll bureau for another of their employers, in which case it'll recognize it and you just put that in that point there. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to assume that you haven't got the services of a payroll bureau and you use your own software within your own payroll system. So you then, in terms of the questions going forward, it makes little difference. The next screen is showing you the different contribution models which you can have within your pension scheme. Well over 90% of our customers are set up with Plan 101, which is the minimum contribution basis for auto-enrolment, you're probably aware, which is based on band earnings and is on a phased basis. So you, the employer, and your employee will each be paying 1% contributions until October 2017, when the minimums go to 2% for you and 3% for the employee, and then in 2018, 3% employer and 5% employee. There are 4 other contribution models which you can apply. You can have one contribution model for all of your employees, or you can mix and match. You could have Plan 101 for the majority of your employees, for instance, and maybe 104 or 105 for senior managers. And you can have any number up to 5 different contribution tiers. I'll explain what 104 and 105 are in a minute when we go through setting the scheme up. But just to mention, 102 is contributions on basic pay, as indeed all these other 4 are, starting at 2% employer, 1% employee, then going to 3 and 3 in October, and 4 and 5 in October 2018. And that is the minimum for auto-enrolment on a basic salary basis. 103 is trying to encourage employers who want to pay in a little bit more. So the employer is paying twice what the employee is on a phased basis up to October 2018. 104 is a minimum contribution of 10%, with the employer paying at least half of that. And Plan 105 is a matching option, which you're probably aware is the employee pays an amount and you are prepared to match their contribution up to a certain maximum, 10%. So let's choose 101 as the default tier. Gives you a little bit more confirmation as to what the contribution rates are for employee and employer, and some narrative down here to help you a little bit more if you need it. Confirmation that it's on band earnings. So that would apply, that's the default tier. Assuming that you would like to add another one, as I said, I'll show you Plat 104. We add that to the participation agreement, application form. You'll see 101 is still retained there and 104 appears below it. The first thing we need to do is to name that tier. So let's call it senior managers. You want to put in a little bit more for them. The default contribution rate is 4% employee, 8% employer, but it doesn't have to be that. If the employee is paying 4, the employer must pay at least 6, because remember it's got to be overall 10. If they're paying 5, employer must pay 5. So you can mess about with and play around with the contributions until you arrive at what you actually want. Okay, let's say you actually decide you don't want that particular one. So you can change the plan type to a 105. Let me show you what happens with a matching contribution tier. Now, because this is auto-enrollment, there are certain minimum contributions that you must make for regulatory purposes, as you're aware. So the minimum contribution must be 2% of basic pay. And then you can match up to, say, 4%. And as soon as you click on that maximum button, it populates the maximums that the employee must pay. And this will be the minimum for auto-enrollment purposes. You can't do anything that doesn't satisfy regulations. The purposes of this demonstration going forward, I'll say that you're going to match up to 6% of contributions. So again, it's confirming that's basic pay. You can remove a tier and add another tier if you so wish, but hopefully I've demonstrated the principle. Now with Now Pensions Master Trust, the default retirement age is state pension age. Once employers have been enrolled into the scheme, they could change their pension age if they require to something which matches more their ambition or expectations. The pension scheme will have a default lifestyling period of 10 years. What that means is that we will start to de-risk the investment of the members. That is, start to move their existing fund and contributions from the Diversified Growth Fund into the Retirement Countdown Fund. And that starts from year 10 from retirement. Again, members can go online if they wish and change their individual lifestyling period to 5 or 15 years, depending on their attitude to risk and how they want to remain invested, how long they want to remain invested in the Diversified Growth Fund. So that's where we've got to, and we now click the Continue button and start to personalize it with you, your details. It's already retained your name from what we put in earlier on. The next question is, are you or are you not a holding company? Likelihood is that you won't be. If you are, you'll need to come out of this process. Give us a call just to make sure that we're setting up the pension schemes in the right way from a legal perspective, and indeed how you would want it with the individual companies' pension schemes underneath. But most people won't be in that position, so let's assume you are not. Next question is, what is your initial auto-enrollment staging date? And you can see it's got all the monthly staging dates going forward, and we're more than prepared to set your pension scheme up a long way in advance if, for instance, that was your staging date. And indeed, don't worry if you've missed your staging date, because we're perfectly happy to accept you in that position and try and get you back on track. Just scroll down to the bottom of the drop-down list and put in your staging date. Let's assume that you've still got a reasonable amount of time and you're staging on the 1st of October 2015. You have the opportunity, if you wish, to start the scheme before your staging date, which is probably called a voluntary scheme, with contributions being started before staging. If that's what you want to do, you just need to let us know when do you want the plan to start, in which case we can go about setting the scheme up on that basis. But the vast majority of clients will start on their staging date, so let's proceed on that basis. What this means is what describes your organisation most accurately. What's the legal description? Limited liability company is obviously common, or you might be a partnership or a sole trader or whatever. If you're a limited liability company or a charity, we will need the registration number. Of course, if you are a partnership or sole trader, you won't have that number, in which case you just check the box there and not applicable will come up and you can proceed. Assuming you're a limited liability company, we put in your registration number and proceed to the next box where we're looking for your registered address, which I will put in fictitiously. And a postcode, say. Now, the next box is asking how many employees do you want included within the Now Pensions plan, and that's on a tiered basis. We'll be assuming that you've probably got 30 or less employees at the time of this webinar in July 2015. The reason we need this is that the only potential charge that you will have as an employer within the Now Pensions Master Trust is if you leave the scheme within the first 2 years of joining. There's an early termination fee for us to cover setup costs, etc. And I'll show you what those are when we view the participation agreement in a few minutes at the end of this process. If you've got a different contact address that you want to specify for us from the your main head office or legal address we put in, you can do so. I'll assume it's the same for now. Your primary contact email address, we'll assume, is the same as above. In fact, so we'll change this to a different one so that I can show you the email traffic that comes in from us to you as the employer in a minute. Primary contact job title. Let's assume that you are the CEO. And that your name is John Dunn. Give you a telephone number of that. The next question is all around how your workers will be assessed for auto-enrolment. Now, the vast majority of all payroll software systems these days will perform assessment, and that's where we would expect it to be done. You need to check with your payroll software provider at an early stage that they can perform that function, but it's almost guaranteed that they will do that. So your payroll system will categorize your workers to eligible, non-eligible, entitled, etc. We next need to know whether or not you want us to send to your workers communications required by auto-enrolment laws. So that's postponement notices, joining letters, etc. We find that the vast majority of employers would like us to do that, and we're more than happy to do so, in which case you'll tick yes, which I'll show you in a minute. If no, you can tick that, check that box, but you will be expected to provide some other method of, obviously, of communicating with your workers, whether that's via your payroll software provider, if they will do it or not. But we're more than happy to do it, so let's assume that we are. If we're going to do that for you, we will, the default basis is via email addresses. We do urge you to make sure that you've got as close to 100% of your employees' email addresses as possible to enable that to happen. And then if you haven't got email addresses for everybody, the default is for us to send PDFs of the communications to a designated PDF email address for yourselves. You'll need to monitor this email address regularly because it will be up to you to print or distribute those PDF communications to your employees. Of course, if we're doing it for you via email, you don't have that responsibility. By PDF, you do. I'll put an email address in there in a minute. I just want to say that if you don't, and it's not PDF, the only other way of communicating is for us to print and post the communications to individuals' postal addresses, and there is a charge that we make for doing that, and you will need to set up a direct debit mandate with us for us to be able to make those charges to you, and that happens during the application process. So let's assume that this is PDF is going to be your default, other than email. So let's just put in fictitious. Hit the continue button. And the next screen that comes up is the payroll forms. We need more information about your payroll details. So PAYE reference, which you will no doubt have, and your payroll contact name. Let's assume it's Mr. Pete Dunn. Their email address. And a contact telephone number. We then need to put more payroll detail. You may have monthly, weekly, fortnightly payrolls. How do you want to describe it? Most people would simply describe it monthly. We need to confirm that the payroll frequency is monthly in that case. What is the name of your payroll software provider? If you start to type it in, it should recognize whose services you use. And the most common one is Sage 50, so that's what we will use. If it's not, doesn't recognize it, just tick that box. You will be able to continue, don't worry about that. You may have more than one payroll, so you can set that up. Let's assume it is weekly, and again just confirm that the frequency of that logically is weekly. And again, what is the software that you're using to run that payroll? Hit continue, or you could add another payroll if you wish. And we've now collected all the information that we need to generate the participation agreement. And that participation agreement can be downloaded as a PDF, or you can see a high-level summary of it, or you can simply look through all the terms within the website itself. The first two-thirds of it are general to every agreement within the Now Pensions Master Trust. Once you get about two-thirds of the way down to the schedule, it's where it's personalised to you, the employer. So it's got all that information and will reflect your staging date of the 1st of October and the contribution rates that we put in, which you remember were the minimum banded earnings and a matching scheme. Further down, it lists all the processes, the main processes, the tasks and the responsibilities, who's responsible for them. The trust manager is Now Pensions Trust, us being Now Pensions Limited, and you, the employer. So that's useful little check what goes on and who's responsible for doing it. Okay, so assuming that you are happy with that, it's what you were expecting, hit the continue button. Are you authorized to apply for this agreement? Assuming you are, click yes. And the next thing that needs to be created is the bank account details from which we will collect the monthly contributions. So add a new bank account. Whatever the name of the employer is. Account number. Next asking, is it only one person that's required to authorise the direct debit instruction on this account? If the answer is no, then you'll be asked to download a PDF and get signatory. We'll assume that there's only one person. And it will also assume that you are actually authorised to sign a direct debit instruction on this particular bank account. If not, you have got the facility to share this form with somebody else within your organisation and ask them to set the direct debit mandate up. But let's assume for this demonstration that you are authorised. So we'll click yes, save that. So that's then confirmed the details of the bank account. And then for the weekly payroll, do you want to add a new one or use the one that we've already set up? Check the details. Got weekly and monthly payroll set up. Confirm the details are correct. And that will then take you through to the participation agreement again, and you'll have the opportunity just to double check and go through to the final sign off of the agreement itself. So you click continue, it just double checks that you are authorized to do this agreement. You'll need to complete it electronically. So you put in your first name, your job title, your email address, and then hit the continue button, and there's just another more information for you to confirm that you're authorized to do it, and you've got all the information and advice that you've required before doing it. You apply, hit the continue button, and that is the application complete. You'll see here that these are the emails which have come into you, your employer's email address, so that we're communicating with you throughout the application process. Confirmation that the direct debit instructions have been set up and that we have received your participation agreement. So that's the end of the application process. And I'll now just go back into the slides just to complete the webinar today, explaining the next steps. What you need to do is register with Now Pensions, if you haven't already done so, of course, as I showed you. Complete that online application, and I hope that by following the instructions, it should be fairly easy and straightforward for you. Do have a look at all the material information that we've got to help you plan your communication strategy with your employees ahead of your staging date. Do also watch the Understanding Your Employer Portal webinar, which is on our website, so that you can understand what you need to do from the time that we send to you information about setting up your employer portal, getting it live, uploading and downloading files, and running it in a business as usual environment. And what we always say to new employers with us, do straight away contact your bureau or your payroll software provider, inform them that you've chosen Now Pensions for your auto-enrolment pension requirements, to make sure that they are up and ready and can help you set up your payroll to integrate with our pension scheme. Thank you very much for attending. I hope it's useful, and we look forward to welcoming you to the Now Pensions Master Trust.